My husband had a secret apartment and a secret life. Have you ever looked at the person sleeping beside you and realized you don't actually know them? I did. For 12 years, I believed my husband was the safest part of my life. I was wrong. The worst part wasn't that he lied. It wasn't even that he had another place to live. The worst part was discovering that everything I thought we had was carefully manufactured. And by the time I understood the truth, I had already become a stranger in my own marriage. My name is Claire. I'm 38 years old, and until last spring, I honestly believed I had one of those boring marriages people secretly envy. Nothing dramatic, nothing flashy, just dependable. My husband, Ethan, worked as a regional sales manager for a medical supply company outside Chicago. He left around 7 every morning, usually with coffee in one hand and his laptop bag in the other. Every evening he came home somewhere between 6 and 8. Sometimes later if he claimed there was a client dinner. We had no children. Not because we didn't want them. Life just kept getting in the way. First his career. Then buying our house. Then fertility treatments that quietly failed, without anyone ever talking about them again. Eventually we stopped mentioning babies altogether. Instead, we became experts at pretending we were perfectly happy. We traveled, hosted barbecues, celebrated anniversaries, smiled in photos. We looked successful, comfortable, complete. Even my friends used to tell me how lucky I was. Ethan still opens the car door for you. Ethan never forgets your birthday. I wish my husband looked at me the way Ethan looks at you. I used to smile every time. Now I realize some people become incredibly good actors after years of rehearsal. Looking back, the signs were always there. I just kept explaining them away. Like the second phone. He told me it belonged to work. His company supposedly required certain managers to carry separate business phones. That sounded reasonable. I never questioned it. Or the business trips that somehow became more frequent every year. Or how protective he suddenly became about his laptop. He even started taking phone calls outside. Again, nothing that screamed cheating. Just little pieces that didn't quite fit together. You don't suspect betrayal when someone has spent 12 years teaching you to trust them. Everything changed on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember because I was standing in our kitchen trying to bake banana bread. I promised my neighbor I would bring dessert for a community fundraiser. My phone rang. It was Ethan. His voice sounded rushed. "Claire, I left an important blue folder on my desk. Can you bring it to my office? I have a meeting in 20 minutes. "Sure." "No, seriously, I'm already behind." I said I'll bring it. "Thank you." He hung up before I could ask anything else. I grabbed my keys, found the folder, and drove downtown. Traffic wasn't bad. I even thought maybe we'd grab coffee together afterward. Something we hadn't done in months. When I reached his office building, the receptionist frowned. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Ethan Brooks." She typed his name into the computer, then looked back at me. "I'm sorry, Ethan hasn't been here today." I laughed. "He literally called me 15 minutes ago." "I'm sorry, ma'am. He hasn't checked in. Maybe he stepped out for lunch. Maybe the system was wrong. Maybe. I called him. No answer. Again. Straight to voicemail. I texted. No reply. I stood outside that office building for almost 20 minutes, convincing myself there had to be an explanation. There always was. When he finally called back nearly an hour later, he sounded annoyed. "I forgot I left for a client meeting. You said you were at the office." "I meant before. You never mentioned leaving. I've got 1,000 things going on, Claire." Then, he sighed. Not an apologetic sigh, an irritated one. As if I need another thing to deal with today. That sentence bothered me far more than it should have. Not because he forgot, because somehow I became the inconvenience. That night he came home carrying flowers, white lilies, my favorite. "I overreacted earlier," he said. "I'm sorry." He kissed my forehead, ordered takeout, poured me a glass of wine. I had almost convinced myself nothing happened. Almost. A week later, I was folding laundry when his suit jacket slipped off the hanger. Something fell from the inside pocket. A small silver key. No label, no keychain, just a plain apartment key. I held it up. When Ethan walked into the bedroom, I smiled. "What's this for?" For the briefest moment, his face changed. It lasted maybe half a second, but I saw it. Shock. Real shock. Then it disappeared. "Oh, storage unit. We rented one after your mother's estate sale." I frowned. "We don't have a storage unit." "Company storage," he answered too quickly. "I keep trade show displays there." "Since when?" "A while." Again, too fast, too smooth, too practiced. That night, while he slept beside me, I couldn't stop thinking about that key. It wasn't the answer. It was the expression. People can invent explanations, but panic always arrives before the lie. The next morning, after Ethan left for work, I searched the house. Not because I wanted to invade his privacy, because something deep inside me had started whispering that my marriage wasn't real. I checked drawers, cabinets, old files, nothing, until I opened the glove compartment of his SUV. Tucked beneath the owner's manual was a folded parking receipt. Not from downtown. Not from his office. Not from anywhere I'd ever heard him mention. The address belonged to a quiet residential neighborhood nearly 40 minutes away. The receipt had been printed 6 different times across the previous 4 months. Same location, same garage, same weekends, same pattern. My heart started pounding. I opened my phone, typed in the address. The satellite image loaded. It wasn't an office. It wasn't a warehouse. It wasn't a storage facility. It was an apartment building, a modern one, small, private, hidden between 2 ordinary streets where no one would ever accidentally drive by. I stared at the screen for what felt like forever. Then I looked down at the silver key, still sitting in my hand. One question echoed in my mind. If this really was just a storage unit, why did he need an apartment key? And why did he go there almost every weekend while telling me he was working? I didn't know it yet, but within 48 hours, I was going to unlock that door, and what waited on the other side would destroy every memory I'd ever trusted. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that silver key. By sunrise, I'd already made up my mind. I wasn't going to accuse Ethan. Not yet. If there was an explanation, I wanted to hear it. But if there wasn't, I needed proof. Friday afternoon, Ethan kissed me goodbye like he always did. "I've got a client dinner tonight. Don't wait up," he smiled. The same warm smile I'd fallen in love with 12 years earlier. "I love you." "I love you too," I answered automatically. The words felt strangely heavy. As soon as he drove away, I waited 15 minutes before grabbing my purse and following him. He never noticed. Downtown traffic separated us just enough that I could stay out of sight. Instead of heading toward his office, he took the interstate. 40 minutes later, he exited into a quiet neighborhood lined with coffee shops, small grocery stores, and modern apartment buildings. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. He wasn't lost. He knew exactly where he was going. He pulled into the underground parking garage, whose address matched the receipt I'd found. I parked across the street. From my car, I watched him step out, carrying nothing but a small duffel bag. He looked relaxed. Not like a man rushing to a business meeting, like someone coming home. He disappeared inside. I waited. 5 minutes, 10, 20. No one came out. Finally, I took a deep breath and crossed the street. The building wasn't luxurious, but it wasn't cheap either. Clean lobby, modern furniture, fresh flowers near the entrance. A place someone actually lived. I walked to the directory. No Ethan Brooks, no familiar last name. Nothing. Maybe he'd rented it under the company's name. Maybe I was still making excuses. I stepped into the elevator. The parking receipt mentioned level 4. Apartment 417. The doors opened with a soft chime. The hallway was silent. I stood outside apartment 417, staring at the number. My heart hammered so loudly I could hear it. "This is crazy," I whispered. I should have left. I should have called him. I should have demanded answers. Instead, I reached into my pocket, pulled out the silver key. It slid into the lock perfectly. One smooth click. The door opened. The apartment smelled faintly of cedarwood and fresh coffee. It wasn't empty. It wasn't abandoned. Someone lived here. The living room looked almost ordinary. Gray sofa, bookshelf, television, a record player, throw blankets folded neatly over the couch. No signs of chaos. No obvious evidence of another woman. For one brief second, relief washed over me. Maybe it really was some company apartment. Maybe I'd imagined everything. Then I looked closer. Framed photographs, not of strangers, of Ethan, my husband, laughing on a hiking trail I'd never seen, standing beside a lake I'd never visited, holding a golden retriever I'd never owned. Every picture had been taken during years we were supposedly building our life together. But I wasn't in a single one. Not one. I walked toward the bedroom in a daze. The closet door stood half open. Inside hung men's clothes, dress shirts, jeans, running shoes, winter coats, enough clothing for someone who lived here full-time, not occasionally. Every shelf was organized, every drawer neatly arranged. This wasn't a hideout. This was a home. Then I noticed something that made my stomach twist. The bathroom. 2 toothbrushes, one blue, one white. 2 bathrobes hanging side by side. 2 coffee mugs drying beside the sink. Someone else shared this place. I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. There it was. The answer I'd been avoiding. There was another woman. I reached for the bedroom nightstand. Inside was a leather notebook. No lock. Just pages filled with handwritten dates, appointments, dinner reservations, weekend, trips, anniversaries. Anniversaries. I blinked. One entry caught my attention. April 18th. 8 wonderful years together. 8 years. 8. I counted backward in my head. 8 years ago, Ethan and I had celebrated our 4th wedding anniversary. He'd surprised me with a weekend in Napa Valley. He'd toasted to many more decades together. Apparently, he'd been celebrating someone else too. My hands started shaking. Then I heard laughter. Outside, coming from the hallway. I froze. Footsteps, getting closer. Voices. One of them was Ethan's. Panic exploded through my body. I looked around desperately. There was nowhere to escape except the bedroom closet. I slipped inside and quietly pulled the door almost shut. The apartment door opened. "I told you she'd never suspect anything," Ethan said with a laugh. My entire body went numb. A woman's voice answered. "I still think you're taking a huge risk." He chuckled. "Claire trusts me more than she trusts herself." Silence. Then I heard something that shattered whatever hope I still had. A kiss. Long, comfortable, intimate. Not the awkward kiss of an affair. The kiss of 2 people who belong together. I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting back tears. Then the woman spoke again. "When are you finally going to tell her?" Ethan sighed. "Soon. You've been saying soon for 2 years. I know, but the divorce has to happen carefully." Divorce? No. We had never discussed divorce. Not once. He continued. "If she gets suspicious too early, she'll start asking questions about the investments." "The investments? What investments?" "You know how much money is tied up," he said. "I've spent years building everything exactly the way I wanted." Years. This wasn't just cheating. This was planning. Every lie, every apology, every anniversary, every vacation, every smile. It had all been part of something much bigger. I wanted to burst out of that closet, to scream, to demand answers. Instead, I stayed perfectly still. Because for the first time since discovering the key, I realized something important. If Ethan believed I knew nothing, then I had something more valuable than anger. I had time. And time could become the most dangerous weapon of all. As I reached for the closet handle, ready to slip out the moment they left, my elbow accidentally brushed against a stack of storage boxes. One tipped over. A loud thud echoed through the bedroom. The apartment fell completely silent. Then I heard Ethan's voice. "Did you hear that?" Heavy footsteps started moving toward the bedroom, toward the closet, toward me. The footsteps stopped right outside the bedroom. I held my breath. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. The closet door handle moved, just slightly. Then the woman laughed. It was probably one of those boxes settling. A long pause. Finally, Ethan sighed. "Yeah, you're probably right." The footsteps faded. I waited. 1 minute, then another. Neither of them spoke much after that. About 20 minutes later, I heard the apartment door close. I counted to 60 before stepping out of the closet. My legs were shaking so badly, I had to grab the dresser to keep from falling. I should have left. Instead, I looked at the notebook one last time. Something was tucked inside the back cover, a folded envelope. It wasn't addressed to anyone. Inside were printed bank statements. At first, they made no sense. Then I saw my own name. Joint investment accounts, retirement funds, savings. Large transfers had been moving into a company I'd never heard of. The authorized signature was Ethan's. Wasn't me. It was a business registered under another name. One that matched the woman living in apartment 417. My husband hadn't just been cheating. He'd been quietly moving our future into someone else's hands. For years. I took pictures of everything. Every statement. Every page of the notebook. Every photograph hanging on those walls. Then I quietly locked the apartment behind me and drove home. I cried exactly once, for about 10 minutes. After that, something inside me changed. The woman who begged for explanations disappeared. The woman who needed proof had already found it. Now all that remained was patience. For the next 3 weeks, I became the perfect wife. I smiled, cooked dinner, asked about his day, even laughed at his jokes. Ethan looked relieved. He truly believed he'd fooled me. Meanwhile, I hired the best divorce attorney I could find, then a forensic accountant. Neither of them looked surprised. Apparently, people with secret lives often make expensive mistakes. The accountant traced every transfer, every hidden account, every shell company. What Ethan believed was invisible left a trail, a very expensive trail. My attorney looked up from the files and smiled. He didn't just betray you. He committed financial fraud. Those 4 words changed everything. We didn't file for divorce immediately. Instead, we waited. The accountant needed time. The attorney needed documentation. And Ethan needed to keep believing he was winning. 1 month later, Ethan invited me to dinner. Our 12th wedding anniversary. He even reserved a table at the same restaurant where he proposed. As the waiter poured champagne, Ethan smiled across the table. To forever. I almost laughed. Instead, I raised my glass. To honesty. He didn't notice the difference. Halfway through dinner, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. His face went pale. Then another. Finally, he stood up. I have to take this. Of course, I said calmly. He walked outside. I watched through the window as the confidence drained from his face. His shoulders slumped. His hands shook. Exactly 30 seconds later, my phone buzzed. It was my attorney. They froze every account. Federal investigators contacted the bank. His business partner is already talking. Perfect. When Ethan returned to the table, he looked like a completely different man. What happened? I asked gently. He forced a smile. Nothing. I slid a large envelope across the table. Then you won't mind opening this. He frowned. Inside were divorce papers, copies of the bank records, photographs from apartment 417, the notebook, every transfer, every lie, every secret. His face lost all color. You followed me? No. I followed the truth. He looked around the restaurant, lowering his voice. We can fix this. I smiled for the first time in weeks. No, Ethan. You spent years making sure this marriage wasn't real. I'm just making sure the ending is. Then I stood up. I know about the apartment. I know about her. I know about the money, and by tomorrow morning, your employer will know too. His mouth opened. No words came out. For the first time in 12 years. He had nothing left to say. I walked away without looking back. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. Because of the financial evidence, the court awarded me nearly everything that legally belonged to our shared assets. His hidden company collapsed during the investigation. His career ended. His professional license was suspended while authorities continued examining the fraud. And the woman from apartment 417? She left him before the legal process was even over. Funny how quickly loyalty disappears when the money does. People often ask if I regret not confronting him the moment I discovered the apartment. I always give the same answer. No. Because anger makes noise. Evidence wins cases. Revenge doesn't always look like screaming. Sometimes it looks like smiling across the dinner table, already knowing you've won. If there's one lesson I carried out of that marriage, it's this. Never ignore the quiet feeling that something isn't right. Trust is the foundation of love. But trust should never require you to ignore reality. Sometimes the person who breaks your heart also hands you the opportunity to rebuild your life stronger than ever before.